Hi and welcome to another episode of Hippo Brain. Today is an extremely interesting episode because I have with me, I'm going to speak with someone who has interacted with and built and worked with one of the brands that I grew up with as a child. And I remember that brand having immense respect from me, had immense love from me. But without further ado, Rajesh, I leave you to introduce our Hippo Brain for this time.
Thank you, Jamit. Welcome to Hippo Brain. We have a great session ahead of us with Samir Patil. And there are four sort of big brands or big names that Samir's life is associated with. And we're going to cover two of them. MIT MBA, McKinsey, and then he was CEO of Amar Chitra Katha, really digitized, modernized Amar Chitra Katha during his stint as CEO, and then set up Scroll, which has become India's pretty much largest independent media entity. And now he's on to something very exciting, which we are going to cover after that, which is Scroll Stack. It's his newest venture. We'll talk about that. Welcome to Hippo Brain, Samir.
Hello, Rajesh. Good to speak to you. We have spoken over many sessions, so this is good to have this formal conversation about what I have been up to. So I mean, you can shoot your questions, or I can tell you a little bit about how this journey came about.
Yeah, let's start with Amar Chitra Katha. So how did you end up at ACK and how did you build it up? And that's a brand which a lot of us, like Jamit said, grew up with. And of course, we've done a lot to modernize it.
I mean, it's one of those like very strange stories. Amar Chitra Katha used to be owned by the Mirchandani family, who had also started India Book House and Crosswords and so on. Somewhere in the 2000s, I think they tried to sell it to different entities, and completely randomly, that proposal landed on my email desk in McKinsey somehow, and a friend and I were chatting about it. And it was some investment bank that had said that, there is this property and so on. We got all very excited, even the numbers of the business is tiny. All of you, we all grew up on it. And it seems like a no-brainer that India should have its own brand for children. We have a sea of stories. We have not really, even today, reinvented them for the cinema, for television. It's very small compared to everything else. So that was the idea. And as soon as I saw it, I knew this is something that can be done and should be done at least. Many moves later, again, the coincidences are too, if it was not real, it would seem like a story. But my friend happened to move to India and worked with the banker that had initially sent that report. And that's how the deal came about. They said, oh, there is a friend of mine who's interested and would be happy to run this, run back and do this. That's how the Amar Chitra Katha deal got put together. And the idea from the very get-go was, I came to it with the, some of the positives as well as some of the limitations of thinking from a big battleship like a McKinsey, which is that, we can reinvent this for internet. Internet was so different then, even though it's only 10, 12, maybe 15 years ago at most. There was no mobile revolution yet. There was no, mobile. There was only VAS. There was no app stores. There was no apps. So it's in that world. And we actually, I would say, if I fast forwarded 5-6 years, we managed to meet a lot of those goals, right? So first of all, I think today, as it stands, more Amar Chitra Katha is sold through digital platforms, physical copies. Everything is back in circulation. Many had sort of died. One of my biggest and most painful projects was to digitize everything in all the languages. So we started repubbing in Tamil and Hindi and all of that. And so then, following this Hindustan Liver and obviously all the business levels, like dikhega to bikega, we spent so much effort to make sure that it was visible in Crossword and so on. It was like, the team that I hired at that time, young people, all of whom have gone on to do bigger and better things, head of Google marketing now, founder of Urban Ladder, all of that. So we really sort of broke our head against the Indian retail supply chain of the time, and also created the online thing. And then most importantly, for a team that had never done this, we actually managed to sign deals with Cartoon Network to create the first 2 ACK films. I'm proud to say all financed by Turner and without the kind of losses that Indian animation studios traditionally make, pragmatic sort of path. We had Karadi Tales. We also got Karadi Tales on the fold. The idea was that you cover the entire range of age group, right? So Karadi for the toddlers and so on. Karadi was on Disney. Amar Chitrakas was on Turner. The series. So many of the things we managed to do. If I look back, I would also say realistically that the amount of investment needed, right, to do this kind of reinvention is way beyond the scope of what the Indian market is able to absorb today, even today, right? Let's 7-8 years ago. But I would say I'm happy that the brand is there. It is doing well. Its relevance is not lost. It needs continuous reinvention and investments. But I think at least if I had to say, we passed on the baton to the next generation of people to do it. So it exists now in digital form. It's on iPad. It's everywhere. So that's at least very quickly my Amar Chitrakatha, business side of the story.
On the personal side, with Amar Chitrakatha, it would have been quite a brand to reinvent, meeting some of Uncle Pai, if I remember.
Yes. So the story of, so Anand Pai is the person who created Amar Chitrakatha, Tinkle, all the characters associated with it. He, worked in this kind of what can I say, like an idyllic surrounding, because at the time there were not too many other publications doing what he was doing. And he spent, like, so just to give you a sense that few people would think of it this way, but like every comic book he created, there was a research process. He would send people to the location, so he really is by far the person most responsible. By the time we did it, we of course restarted the publishing program, added more titles and so on, but nothing compared to the 450 or odd titles that Mr. Pai created over the 30-35 years, right? Which is really the one of the things that is both exciting about media, as well as one of the more what should we say, it's not really easy to think of it as a business, because it takes years and years, right? Brands get created over decades, and we need the kind of patient capital that is there to find in a developing country, because obviously return on investment is very important. So Mr. Pai found that spot for decades. And then the second thing that happens to all businesses hit him, which is disruption, and most people don't know, but his point of view was that what actually changed the world of Amar Chitrakatha and its ability to continuously do new titles was not so much, television and everything came later. It was actually as he started doing some of the longer series, then people did not know when to buy the next one, right? So that was the first hit it got, as it started doing some of these long series where there were like 25 parts to it. People even used to buy it as a magazine before. Almost every month there would be a new title and they would buy it, right? So that's anyway my quick thing on Amar Chitrakatha. And Mr. Pai was quite the character. Again, you wouldn't know, like, for example, he actually did what editors do well, which is attracted a lot of talent to, Khushwant Singh wrote up some of the Sikh titles. Bachi Kacharia wrote some of the Zoroastrian ones. So if you see the credits behind, and then he had another thing, which is the visual flair, right? He collected a bunch of illustrators and artists who created its own idiom. In fact, to some extent, if you say, okay, it's in history part of the Raja Ravi Verma and that sort of tradition, but they adapted it for the comic. They knew there were some Disney people who had come and worked with him. So it's like nothing happens accidentally. It was a lot of work, a lot of inspired choices. And he, in the way, has created actually a look that is impossible for Indian mythology to get out of, right? However much, and in fact, it's the limitation for the next generation, because it's not a look that is very suitable for animation. It was a very drawing look. But anyway, that's really Mr. Pai.
And then, Samir, you went on to start Scroll.
Yeah.
How was that?
So
How's that journey been?
yeah, so the idea behind Scroll, again, it came partly out of the Amar Chitraktha thing, where digital was happening very quickly. It was just the year when the iPhone had come out, and even in the first years when ACK comics were online, more comics were downloaded, not sold, but more comics were downloaded in 1 quarter than were sold in the whole year, right? In 1 quarter, millions of copies, right? So I knew that the mobile thing has come, and I have always had this idea of there should be an Indian voice on things that matter, a voice of reason. And even more so than in a way, Amar Chitraktha was my introduction to media post McKinsey, from theory to practice. I often joke, I went down every rabbit hole of media. We did television shows, we did a film with, like I said to you, we did digital. And sort of from then on, I kind of knew, and I also learned from the editorial experience that Mr. Pai and others had, and how long it took, and the patience it requires, and the independence editorial requires to do anything good. While one knew that in theory, like just watching it in practice. So in any ways, like Scroll was a culmination of everything that I had learned from both these point of views. And from a purely business point of view, it was very clear, and it's still very clear to me, right? Mobile is the platform. Almost nobody, even today, is thinking mobile first. And this is not just about the world of media. In every part of the world, every part of industry, people have not accounted for the fact that the degree to which the workflows and everything has changed. So anyway, I saw that also as an opportunity to create a mobile first, digital only platform. And in fact, from the very early days, even dotted line to Scrollstack, I had always thought of it as a platform. But it's only in the last year and a half or 2 years, I would say, that the platformization of digital media and the degree to which you cannot really have a digital media separate entity has become clearer. So I'll go into it as we speak about what sort of the big idea, but one has led to the other to the other.
So before you move into the platform, and that's something we definitely want to pick your brains on, your experience with Scroll, it is an independent current affairs, news, I don't know, opinion site. And I'm a reader, and it seems very unbiased and objective. But in today's environment, how does that really work? And is it difficult to hold that editorial? Is it difficult to create a system or an ecosystem that holds your values true? And does it pay?
Yeah. So both things. I think I would say from just like on, Amar Chitraktha, the editorial was all about independence, but after that it was on Mr. Pai. Similarly, here it is all Naresh and Supriya and Rohan, who have been for long the team. My only credit, if any, is that I do not, like, that is a separate decision-making process and how they do it. Other than the basic values that we want to be analytical and a voice of reason, and as little opinion as possible. But I think the harder thing in media was for the last 3-4 years to actually construct. It's the same thing like I tried to say with in anything in media, the question is, can you construct a viable business model that allows both experimentation as well as push for quality? Because there's a push away from quality, right? In the early days, a content business would always be ABCD, right? Astrology, Bollywood, cricket, and devotional, right? And it's only in the last few years, thanks to actually Facebook, most people don't realize that Facebook created the spurt in quality publications, because people share what makes them look intelligent. They may search for the lowest common denominator, right? And so the first spurt and the revival of serious media happened because of Facebook. I mean, New York Times and Atlantic and everybody owes it to Facebook, because without that, in the Google only world, they were losing out to extreme views and extreme sort of searches. So in any case, going back to the idea, I think the independence of media is actually much more dependent on the independence of and scalability of platforms and scalability of the business model. And I would say at this point, like, digital media's biggest challenge and media's biggest challenge overall, it's not just like is that it's like a cottage industry when it is done only at the scale at which we are in India. But even if you are very big, right? Even if you are Disney at this point, even if you take away the pandemic, right? Before the pandemic, Netflix was the most valuable media company in the world, right? which has only a single product, a single business model, and a single global audience. They may do many things behind the scenes and to make it sort of per country and all of that, right? Can you imagine that versus the complex business model of cruise lines and theme parks and movie business and theaters, right? And so to me, that epitomizes what has happened to the industry over the last 6-7 years, if not even longer. That the digitalization of that business at first was slow and nobody even saw it in this big thing, but at this point it has completely wiped out everything else. And in that sense, digital media, especially to do with current affairs, is like a little tail on the elephant, right? The big elephant, it's so small that it's almost like it's not so it's very difficult to think of it in isolation, because when you think of it in isolation, it goes into the rabbit hole of abhi ye kaun karega iska, how will this be, you need a platform approach to the world. And even the old approaches, so let's dig a little deeper, right? Even old approaches, and which again, when we started Scroll, my sense was that you sort of you do both the classic media thing where you have some current affairs, you have magazine kind of features, you have sports, you have cinema, and you sort of create publications. Most publication houses in the old world had many brands. In the digital world, there is no reason to create separate things, a single platform, but you could have very feeds, to use the current vocabulary. But even that, like the fundamental challenge of media can be put down to just one or two numbers, which is that even the largest digital company in India, media current affairs, can claim maybe 100 million users a month, right? YouTube and Instagram and WhatsApp deliver you that 100 million audience every hour in India, right? And if I add to that the second number, which is that Facebook and Google can put your advertisers in a slot which says that I want somebody who lives in the west side of Bandra near this. So you have infinite scale and microscopic targeting. Media does not stand a chance in front of that when it comes to the old ad supported model, right? So sorry, I went into problem solving right away, but fundamentally the way I see it is this: that scale, there is no comparison, right? Everybody is not like that poonch of the elephant, not even the poonch, it's a hair on the poonch of the elephant when one looks at the, so the way to think about, at least for me, for media, is attention, right? The quantity to think, instead of thinking inside out, let's think outside in. You are a person, let's look at a day in your life and what hours you spend on various things. News gets a disproportionate attention in our mind because it's a must check, you check, but you spend no more than 5 minutes on it, most likely. You spend hours on your WhatsApp, you spend hours on your television, delivered probably through OTT. So I think there is going to be, over the next few decades, to, at least to me, the move to Scrollstack has been about these two things, right? First, the ad-supported business model is dead. I don't think it's an extreme statement to say that it really is dead. It really is about, and I'll come back to why that is and what are the consequences of it. And it's dead at any scale. Forget Scroll, though, is like it's a little, at any scale, it does not work for media because of the issue of social, giving so much more to an advertiser. And the second is, there is this sort of attention, thing where the first order thing has been said. Everybody has said, oh, attention is sort of fragmented, or attention is too much on the digital device. But let's think about what else. I think what else is that people will start valuing their own attention, and that they will not engage as much with things that are, and this might lead to two internets: one for the people who are well-heeled, who can pay to, not look at their attention, and the other for everybody else, ad-supported, full of distractions and full of low-quality information. Right? But regardless, I think, so if I go back and I look at all the challenges of media, I think there's a fundamental challenge. The way to think about it from an opportunity point of view is the last 30 years. Imagine the 40 years of the internet are completely fueled by these dinky ads, right? These little ads. And when the ads first came about, right, when AOL, I think, was the one that really, AOL hired somebody from MTV, Bob Pittman, and he was the first one to get, like, till then, nobody believed there'll be any advertising on the internet. We can't even think of it because now internet is all advertising. But till Pittman took his old media chops and convinced some big advertisers to move to AOL, nobody thought there'll be an ad-supported internet either. And so now we are 3 decades later, we have built this entire edifice of the internet, and that is going away to 3-4 companies in terms of, just the consolidation of ad revenues. So anyway, sorry for my long-winded answer on that, but that's what it is.
No, I think what you're saying is interesting, and I love the concept of two internets. So in many ways, you're saying because the ad model fundamentally is for the smaller user, a very small portion of the entire thing, because no big advertiser wants to come to you. You're getting scale somewhere else. You're getting pinpoint accuracy somewhere else. So it is difficult to fund an independent publishing purely on ads, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
you can be very small, right? So you can be very, very small, and essentially be able to support a team of a few people,
like a
or
boutique
you can
in some way.
Everybody is a boutique on digital, right? It's not even, I mean, it's a very large boutique because our country has 1 billion people. What is 10 million in that? Right? It's like everybody gets surprised. How many people came to your wedding? To say 300, it's a small wedding. I mean, people outside India are like, what? 300 is a very large. So India, I think, like I said, every minute there are 100 million people on these big platforms in India. Right? That is, if I compare to that, everything else is not just boutique. It's not even.
So that's why you see the rise of the second internet, which I hear you say is the paywall internet. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. So I would put it in more optimistic terms. So I think we have seen the rise of the internet that democratized information, that got everybody fairly low priced internet, right? Let's not look at it as a bad thing only. Like I said, it's a very complicated history of it, right? In the sense that now everybody has access to Google on their phone if they're above a certain cutoff, which was not there if I compared it to the telephone, for example, the old telephone, the POT system. But it has reached its limits, because like in every evolution of a market, there's consolidation. There are clear winners of the ad world, and I don't see that changing. So that's the reality. But the positive thing of it is also what I would call the emergence of this payments infrastructure, right? So my theory is that if you, like, there are some people who say that, oh, there's a failure of the market, that you are not able to support good quality publications on the internet, right? Let's look at that thing. And news media is the one most talked about, but everything else, right? It's not as if there is a great children's programming coming out only on the internet, right? Sesame Street was made for television. Our best programming was made for television. So the internet is not able to fund good quality programming of any sort. This is true as of now. At most, it is hybrid. Now, I would say, let's look at why that thing is. It's actually not a failure of the market, because the digital internet as it stands right now is not a market for content. You only have a market when you pay for it. It is a market for advertising. You are the product, as people are fond of saying. So, and in that way, it works beautifully, right? If you're an advertiser, the internet is the perfect market. If you're a content creator, the internet is not anything at all. And the reason it is that is because payments were not ever the underpinnings of the internet. And this is where my hope on Scrollstack, and this is my bet on Scrollstack, that's why it's shifted, is that payments are now ubiquitous. It is possible to use UPI to make a 5 rupee payment to the bhajiwala, even a 1 rupee payment. And I think this is happening around the world. It has already happened in China. It is happening around the world. It is coming to the US last, because the payments infrastructure in the US and the Western world, it has been leapfrogged by India and leapfrogged by China. It's very archaic in the rest of the world. What I mean by that is bank-to-bank transactions at very low, bank-to-bank microtransactions, right, which UPI supports. So UPI is one part of the magic. The other part of the magic is the phone has a biometric ID. So in effect, what you have is a perfect transaction system in the hands of every person. And this is, to me, this is a deep point. The fact, I will again state it, the internet was never a marketplace for content. It was a marketplace for advertising, and it worked beautifully well. You can see there are two $500 billion companies that got created out of it. The next internet will be an internet where content creators should be able to get paid. And it's not only content creators. It will be service providers. It will be people who might be doing a Zoom call for a ticket. Once you get the magic of mobile payments married to the amazing prevalence of the internet, you will get a Cambrian explosion of new ideas. One of them is Scrollstack. I do not think that I can even sort of describe, but I would take you back in history. Look at it when AOL started advertising. There was no double click, and Rajesh knows all the, there really was an explosion of innovation, lots of advertising market, and the market has worked out, and here we are. In the same way, we are at the same spot, but this time around payments and the internet. And what is driving it is what I said, traditional media, but traditional media is not even interesting when it comes to the internet. There are far more people on Instagram with followerships exceeding in fashion, let us say, of Vogue, right? There are thousands of people with more distribution than Vogue on social media who write about fashion. Think of it, that old world where, so our calculations are, there are 50 million people on social media with the followers of more than 1,000 people. And that number is growing 20 to 30% every year. So, and those people, in some cases, they will have distribution rivaling that of what you would think of traditional media brands. And yet they don't make any money from this, right? So these creators who have massive audiences make no money from the audience they have created for the social platform, right? Literally in the case of, say, something like a Twitter, there is no revenue share. In the case of Instagram, there's nothing. YouTube, you might get, but even on YouTube, if you have 1 million followers in India, you would make like $200, $300 a month from it. And maybe in the West, you can make $5,000, $10,000. So fundamentally, what I see is the coming together of everything we said before: quality content, massive penetration of internet married to mobile payments, and you get a different world. And so my question on there are two internets emerging. I think it may not be as sort of stark as that. It won't be the rich-poor divide. What you will get is that you will get an internet where payment is at the heart of it. Whether it will go in the sort of a direction of, for example, 1 rupee payments for the day's news. Okay, it is possible today to do. Who will be the one who does it? Who does 365 rupee direct to the mobile? Some of our incumbents are very much capable of doing it. There are many others who will do it. So I don't think we should assume at this point that it will become the rich-poor kind of thing, that it actually has the chance of being, and again, the evidence I will cite for you, which is my favorite example, right? What I am trying to do with Scrollstack is to push the price at which a creator can offer something to the lowest possible. Because what it will do is it will create mini marketplaces, right? So it may be that Rajesh likes to write about a certain topic and there are only 100 people who are interested in it. But Rajesh's life should be possible with those 100, right? Or 500. Minimum order quantity, to use a engineering terminology, for creators should be brought down to as small as possible. Then you're outside the tyranny of these millions and millions, right? The world's best ideas were published in books, not circulated more than a few thousand copies at the first run, right? It's only after many. So ideas require time, ideas require experimentation. And so my hope is that the new internet will allow that.
Samir, this is very interesting because in a way, and you saw that world also. Telcos had the opportunity with mobile VAS in the early days. This 1 rupee a day sachet content, okay, is what they were offering for a wide range of services. The mistake they made was that, and you know it, the content creator would basically get 10 or 15% of the end user price, and therefore there was no incentive to really create.
Exactly. So, and now, exactly, absolutely right. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and now what you're saying is that let's flip that. the same micro content idea, because the telcos had an amazing billing system. The payment system was all there.
Yeah.
Okay, whether it was prepaid or postpaid, they had the money with them, available to them. So that was first point. So what you're doing in Scrollstack, and we'll dig deep into this now, is creating at two levels. One is a two-sided platform. So there are the creators of content, and there are the sort of, whether you call it the readers, viewers, or the followers, or the fans of that content. And these are creators who are already creating content today, but they're not getting any money for it.
Yeah.
Enabling infra to them is this global scale micro payments infrastructure, which is what you have sort of, so you are innovating at two levels. One is on the platform side for creation, and more importantly is the payment side, really.
Exactly.
Is that the right way to look at Scrollstack?
Absolutely, right. And I think let me sort of dig a little deeper into this idea of a marketplace, because you brought up the telecom example, and and also let's look at why wouldn't Facebook do payments, for example. Why wouldn't Facebook allow you to charge for posts? So I think this is a matter of actually great importance for everybody to think about, why did the original internet fail at fueling good quality content, and be very clear-eyed about it, instead of feeling, oh, some bad evil happened and so on because of certain players. Fundamentally, and again, I go back to the idea of a market failure, which I absolutely don't think it is. It is a big, beautiful market for advertising. For a market to function, there need to be at least 3 or 4 independent things happening at the same time. In fact, I think there's a good theoretical reason why the telcos market was never going to work anyways, which is that even the Facebook and Google advertising market is not a market at all. It's completely opaque. You do not know who the buyer is. You do not know who the seller is. The buyer doesn't know the seller doesn't know the buyer, and the market maker is the same company. So the new regulation that will come, I can bet that it's the heart of it is the so-called internet marketplaces are no marketplaces even for advertising. They were never for content, is the second point. For a market to work, it must work like the markets we know, right? Whether you take the stock exchange, which is the most sort of, because there are many players, the buyer and seller should know each other. The buyer and seller can have an intermediary who can make a small percentage, like in the Scrollstack case, but cannot be opaque about who sees what and when. And the preconditions for such a market for content did not exist. Again, I'm not saying that this didn't happen because some conspiracy. The preconditions didn't exist. Now we have mobile phones that can pay very small transactions. We have discovery mechanisms, not just social and search, but many others, WhatsApp, in personal messaging. On the supply side of the market, we have always had supply. We've always had lots of creators, but the fact is now everybody with a $500 phone can make a movie in 4K. This didn't exist before. Can take a picture as good as what you would cost a specialized equipment to do. Can type in Hindi, Tamil, any language. These are preconditions that didn't exist before. So my sense is that if we think about a marketplace, let us not fall for the internet's definition of a marketplace. None of them are marketplaces because they're opaque, vertically integrated systems controlled by a single firm. What will happen because of the emergence of these payments is many marketplaces will emerge. Now you do not need a consolidated player, and that goes back to the telco reason. The reason the telco wouldn't work is the same thing, right? The telco controls the entire vertical marketplace, right? For it to be, and it can enable the payments, but the moment it had disproportionate power over demand and supply, then it's not. So I think. So that I think is the reason why it didn't exist and the reason why it will come into play. But the fundamental reason it will come into play is now there is hunger in the market because literally I told you there are 50 million creators who work every day to attract thousands and thousands. Literally the valuations of these big platforms are driven by the individual work done by these creators, and they make no money from it. It is a paradox so big that what is fueling the web is the independent creators working independently every day to create, so I think it is, my contention is not that social media goes away. In fact, social media will only grow and their networks will grow. To me, there is a monetization marketplaces that will start emerging. Some people will make money from advertising. It is possible that you have a 10, 20 million followers on Instagram that you will get a sponsor. But what if you are a writer who has only 500 followers, but they are passionate? I want to be able to collect 1 million such 500 people.
And what's interesting is we are seeing some of this happen in the world of e-commerce already.
Yeah, no. In fact, my motto for Scrollstack is I want to make the selling of digital goods as easy it is to sell physical goods. Simple.
And you're seeing this now. I mean, you're seeing small micro entrepreneurs come, bake cakes and all kinds of things promoted through WhatsApp and collect money through Paytm or UPI or any of these methods. And all they need is an audience of maybe 500 or 1,000 to create a very sustainable business. And you're saying that the same basic idea now applied in a way, it's
content.
What should have been the first frontier of the internet is now coming full circle, saying that you want the high quality content, you can now pay for it, and you can get the interest that you want, and that's where Scrollstack comes in.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Okay, so
it's not just high quality, even low quality content, as long as you have an audience for it that is ready to pay, and therefore there is a market. Now, in such a thing, Samir, I have just a small question. Do you believe Scrollstack has the ability, like an e-commerce, to create the demand and the supply, or do you believe that the supply would create the demand? How does it work? Is it a two-sided marketplace, or you control one part of it and the other takes care of it? How do you visualize this platform coming in?
No, fantastic question, and both are related. The first is the quality question, and the second is also the question of, is it a two-sided marketplace? So I think, and again, like I said, if I take a step back, let's remember the big picture. There'll be many marketplaces will come. I think that the first ones that will succeed, which will make it's a two-sided marketplace, because discovery still remains a challenge on the internet. So what I mean by that is, let's say you are a big follower of Tamil literature. And I'm deliberately taking Indian language examples because I think they're the biggest global, we started by talking about Amar Chitra Katha. The number of Amar Chitra that can sell in Indian languages and English together is ginormous, right? And it is so difficult to do so. In fact, that was one of our big discoveries, that it was not a separate set of people who were buying the language Amar Chitra. It was people who were buying both together to teach their children the English, because they knew English. They would buy both. So yeah.
Interesting.
So,
interesting.
Yeah.
I would have never imagined that. But go on.
Yeah. So no, coming back to the quality as well as the market question. Again, there is an idea in the theory of marketplaces of horizontal and vertical differentiation, right? And the idea is that what happens in a, again, well-functioning marketplace where there is an independent demand and supply, where there is an independent regulator/view of what transactions are happening, over time, markets become horizontally and vertically differentiated. What it means by horizontal differentiation is there are markets for different genres, right? And within each genre, there's a market for different quality. So we are so used to the beauty of this, the invisible hand of the market working, that we don't see it until the internet came about with this monoculture of crap. Sorry for my language. But if you think of cinema, right, there is cinema of all kinds of quality. There is Cannes for it. There is Filmfare Award. There are all kinds of things, right? Look at books. There are books that are written on the same genre. Let's look at horizontal and vertical differentiation, right? You see that there are 20 different types of, what a publication will have, right? That they have their sci-fi list, they have their fiction list, they have their literary fiction list. Now, within the fiction list, there can be various levels of quality, and there are, right? Each having its own audience, its own, but the publication company and the marketplace for books is beautifully fine-tuned to place all kinds of ideas in front of you. Why is the internet not like that? Let's ask ourselves the question, why is the internet not like it? Because it is not a market. It doesn't have the ability to organize itself around genres and quality, and it has started to do it. So think about it. If I told you 6-7 years ago, we started with this Netflix and Disney example, but nobody said anybody would pay for content. Everybody said nobody wants to pay. But the fact of the matter is, the paid video content company is now the most valuable company in the world, right? So there are two different ideas here. Netflix is not a marketplace, it's a single service, but it is showing that people are willing to pay. And the second thing is, as the digital world becomes more like a true marketplace, where, and at the heart of a true marketplace is, you and I enter into an independent transaction saying, you said something interesting, I want to pay for it, right? You and me, there is nobody else. There is some platform, there is some Visa card, there is some scroll stack, but fundamentally the creator and the viewer are in direct. Then you will see the magic of the marketplace happen, as it has happened. If you are on the progressive left, you might sort of be skeptical of what I'm saying. So I will provide you with evidence that it actually does happen, right? Whether very low price pamphlets, I mean, it has already happened in the physical world, right? We must allow for this truly well functioning marketplace to happen. Then of course, I'm not saying that everything will automatically get solved. I think newsrooms, for example, will still suffer because they're not enough potentially buying patrons for it. So that's a separate problem, but let's not let the tail of the elephant cloud our thinking about the big picture.
So there are probably two ways to play this game if you do believe monetization of content can work. One is probably creating a marketplace that attracts the readers and the viewers, that is able to classify various sets of content horizontally, vertically, make it easy to find, easy to discover, etc. And therefore, when there are people coming in, there should be enough content providers coming in as well and trying to work it. And the other way, if I would just argue, if somebody comes and says, forget all of this, I will create only the pivot, which is the payment, and ensure that I give that to various different people.
Yeah.
And
SaaS versus a marketplace.
Basically, you're right. SaaS versus a marketplace. And the way I hear from you is that maybe the internet future may be either or two and a half kind of a thing, where you have the free internet, you have the paid, and the paid is also broken up into 2-3 kind of verticals. Yeah. And there is probably space for everything to exist, but fundamentally there is a payment, and that payment is a vote into the kind of quality or the kind of content that people want.
Yeah, the consequences of that simple thing, that around the roadside corner, I ran into an author who I liked, and I used to buy that book from that author directly, and I knew her and she knew me. That 100 years back led to the boom in the marketplace of ideas. At this point, the marketplace of ideas can do with a similar kind of approach.
So it's almost, I used to read about these things, about maybe 100 years ago, this idea of pamphlets, which
exactly
they're selling for a rupee or whatever, few annas at that time, maybe 100 years ago. And you didn't need to have a circulation of 10 million. Okay, you had a circulation in hundreds, some people follow you. What is happening is, in a way, what's fascinating about what you're building really is the fact that for the first time, people who are creators and who don't have to be superstars, they don't have to be the professionals, they don't have to be the top of the pyramid people. A lot of people with some expertise, some free time, now can take that and monetize their time. Okay, in terms of what they are writing, other people can pay them, like you said, maybe a rupee for a poem they have written or something like that. But you have 10,000 people doing that. It's a good enough start.
Yeah, absolutely. And we already have that. So we have been in closed beta for the last 3-4 months. But our friend Vivek, for example, who writes, right? One of his posts was the first one we pushed. There were like some 50 people paid for it in 2 days. So I think on many issues, I think a lot more people will pay for poetry possibly than they might for other kinds of analysis. But fundamentally, what will happen, and is already happening in many ways, is that people are willing to start paying for things that they care about. It is not, in fact, like the way it has played out outside India is worth looking at. It's all China mostly, right? So think of the world of this as 3 different worlds, right? One world is what we think of traditional media, and disproportionate attention gets ascribed to it, right? What I mean by that is a world of, news and magazines and even television and some part of it. There's a bigger world in addition to this world of what I would call utilitarian content. You want guitar lessons. I am the best person in Bandra to give guitar lessons. And now I have put my guitar lessons for 50 rupees. And in addition to that, you can come to my Zoom classes for 1,000 rupees. I'm not able to do this today in 2 minutes. Scrollstack is trying to solve this fundamental issue, right? And then the third category of people, which is not happening but yet at that scale, but pandemic is going to accelerate it, that you can think of the entire world of services that can be done at a distance. Think of work at a distance, right? Where the only exchange is actually some kind of a digital thing, right? Either my assessment of your future as an astrologer or my analysis of whatever challenges you had. So I think what is going to happen is what has happened in the Amazon marketplace, right? Which is the world supply of various products and produce manufacturers are all there. Same thing, there will be marketplaces. And like every marketplace, to your earlier points in the conversation, it will evolve. In some industries, for example, I think, for example, sci-fi is a very strong category. What might happen is an independent market just of that, right? Of people and enthusiasts and all, and this will all happen in the shadow and coexisting with social. Social is not going away. Social is going to be the main distribution platform. That's not, in fact, this is a way of making social even more useful for social media platforms as well as for the creators.
So we're seeing some of that happening. So I can give you lots of examples, like people who were having dance studios, and they're pretty popular on internet, on Instagram or wherever. And they used to have the monetization of having classes where people would come in. And with the pandemic, this has moved to Zoom, and they realize you can charge 1/5, but you get 10 times a bigger audience.
Exactly.
And therefore you're able to make it far more. So the social still stays there. The monetization shifts. And the monetization traditionally where would have been physical now remains digital. So you have a freeware, like a freemium kind of a thing coming through. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So in a way, if you see the last 8-10 years of digital, I would only call it disaster for traditional media, you would see the one lesson that has come out of it is this idea of a funnel. Right, you have a lot of people who engage with you, who are, let's call them your readers or viewers. Then you have a next tier of people who you have a deeper engagement. You have their email, or they have downloaded your app or whatever, right? And then you have at the bottom of the funnel people who are willing to pay a subscriber or a one-off payment. This is the funnel of life for digital media or a creator, whether you like it or not. If the fact is that not everybody who listens to you will be willing to buy your book. This has not changed. Now, what has changed is that what we are trying to do is to give this funnel to everybody. You decide. So most likely the top of your funnel will be social and will remain so. Some of them, you can convert it into your followers. You can reach out by email and phone numbers. And some of them will pay for what you did. And I think the thing will evolve very rapidly. It's hard to see. But my fundamental belief still remains in the way complex markets function, the horizontal and vertical differentiation. Once you have the basics in place, which is payments between the creator and the consumer, and a really independent market, not opaque. मुझे क्या पता क्या algorithm ने किसको क्या दिखाया? I mean, that's not a market.
No, I think, Sameer, this is definitely, when I see my behavior change in the last year, a number of people who used to send out free newsletters have now said that, okay, if you want this thing, $100 a year. Okay. So they're spending time curating, and it's becoming a full time. You get 1,000 people, you're making $100,000 a year with almost no middle person taking away a large chunk. Okay. There is the quality that they are doing, the time that they are investing now is getting monetized, which earlier was just something on the side, which is there. And
absolutely,
I think another innovation that you're sort of bringing in, I think, is also the fact that this ability to almost pay for a single story or a single article. So I may not have to subscribe to 365 days of someone. I look at something, hey, you know what, that particular thing which that person wrote today, I want to be able to pay 2 rupees for that, 3 rupees for that. that kind of infra is really what you're building out also, right?
Absolutely, right. So this goes back to, you know, sometimes right now, at least the venture world is very fascinated with this idea of subscriptions, and subscription to me are a special case of the business model. What we are trying to do is exactly what you said. Fundamentally, I can do transactions as small as possible. In India, it can be at the moment on the Scroll Stack 10 rupees, and outside India, $1 or €1. And we will try and keep pushing it down. At that point, what happens is that a lot of things get activated, right? There's a fundamental thing where you can pay for a certain single content, and there's also the reality of it, right? So I think there'll be a lot of interesting subscription businesses and subscription publications, newsletters. But the counterfactual to that, or the thing to remember, is that the New York Times has 1,800 editorial staff working for it, and it sells its product at $14 every month, right? $14, 1,800 people. Now, even if I assume a lot of differentiation, lot of specialization, there is a pricing when it comes to this traditional media. There is almost no limit to the number of guitar lessons that one can actually do, because it's very localized. It's a combination of. So again, I would keep pulling everybody back away from the traditional media. So the first wave of publication platform or payment platforms that have come up are trying to shoehorn the old media into the new, with the same problems of that there is a demand supply mismatch. But I think there's a broader thing where if you enable transactions, you don't even know what creators. So the first creators, I'll give you a real life example. The first creators, we are doing this in closed beta. Next week, we go in open beta. The first creators who have adopted Scroll Stack, besides the people, so there is Penguin, there's HarperCollins, the traditional folks, of course. But there are also people who I hadn't thought of, right? There are a lot of sketch and graphic artists because, and then there are photographers who were not using other platforms because they use Instagram, but on Instagram, they can't explain their thought process or whatever, right? So the market is far more wise than and I think this is again a difficult thing to articulate for our audience, which is where the word market has been associated with other things. But my fundamental point is that the diversity of the creator base we have, we vastly underestimate it. And I still think, to me, it is the language creators, it is the different kinds of creators who have no visibility, who have already built substantive followerships of their own. They may have thousands of people following them on various platforms.
And the creativity which I think this can unleash is tremendous, because, I mean, there are various people good at something, but today they have really no way to get onto a marketplace or to get to monetize what they're doing. And Scroll Stack really offers them that.
And exactly, and the point at which you can monetize is so large that most people will just give up and it's not right for them, especially once you think of Indian languages, our languages, where the audience may be, maybe like my theory is that a lot of the audience who can pay is the same theory from Amar Chitra Katha, that the people who are buying the language editions were the same people who are buying the English. In the same way, maybe our overseas audience can actually fuel our language creations, right? So the Bengali author has a far bigger market of Bengali speaking people outside who are willing to pay anything for a great Bengali story. Right. In fact, one of our first authors, Kunal Basu, has put his entire novel into Scroll Stack. Right. And I'm like, this goes back to a little bit of my, some of the conversations I see on sort of social about like what is Scroll Stack and so on. I think, of course, as an entrepreneur, you can take it with a pinch of salt. Nobody has created this platform. As of now, there is no live platform, whether in India or outside, which allows you to do everything that we have done with these micro payments built in globally, right? So in India, UPI, in the US, Stripe, and all of that. And so I'm sort of, we have such a sense of, what is it like from outside? Boss, it is not like anything outside yet. So just because there is a Substack that allows a newsletter, I do not mention the word news. Nobody in India cares about email. Everything is about WhatsApp. Why would I create a newsletter thing? But anyway, we will go as we go.
What's very interesting is the following. I mean, as you were speaking, my mind goes back 25 years when I launched India World in March 1995. At that time, we actually had a payment part to the site. We had very good content, Lakshman cartoons, India Today, Amar Chitra Katha, and so on. And I was trying to charge, I first launched at $59. a year. In about 3 weeks, I had to bring that down to 29 and then 20. A year and a half later, I gave up on it because I realized that in many of the organizations in the US, and this was early days, so all NRIs, I think in all of GE, I had one subscriber, a lot of traffic. So the login and
Everybody
password was sharing the thing. And I said, you can't get Indians to pay. And I gave up on that and I joined the rat race of the free internet.
So I think absolutely I think, and two things are true there. There was too much friction. So, in my early McKinsey days, I actually worked in the music industry in New York. And and this is it's a worthy lesson for what we are doing with ScrollStack. At the time, there were two consortia of music companies. There were 5 music companies that control 80% of the world's music, of which they had splintered into 2 groups, trying to create a paid music service. This was the heyday of Napster. Napster had stolen all the music, and as a result, these 5, and I happened as McKinsey to be part of one of those guys trying to figure out, as a new person, trying to figure out what is the pricing thing. And a new service came. At the time, nobody thought about it or knew about it, which was at $1 a song, 99 cents, which was Apple. And it swept aside everything. And the industry made a huge mistake. And now what do they have? The industry has nobody. They should have, if they were smart about it, what they would have done is commoditize the forward chain, right? If you're a creative company, which at this point ScrollStack is a platform. If you're a media, what you want to do is many ScrollStacks to exist, many social media to exist, so that you are not beholden to one, but you allow the creation of these vertically integrated monopolies, more or less. And so to your pricing question, I think people will pay. Indians are paying for Spotify, Gaana, everything, right? So one is about convenience, that it needs to be convenient and priced right. But the other places, even bigger belief I have is that the people, once given the choice on both sides and you allow the market to work, a price will settle at where people value. So it may be that the Tamil literary buyers are willing to actually pay far more than anybody ever will pay for news. Right? It is very likely.
And one point I think which many times we forget, and it goes back to the market analogy that you talked about, is that every producer is also a consumer. So every person who's basically paying can also become a creator.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, one of our taglines, which is not what we're going with now when we go open beta, is everyone is a creator on ScrollStack. That it could be that a child who actually paints very well sends it to his or her family, and they contribute to his little piggyback for him to get crayons. Not like, now everything should not be about money, but I'm just sort of giving you an example of what it can be. And it will happen. It's just that, like, again, if I take a step back for a moment, I can take, like, let's be skeptical. Let's say this ScrollStack hai, apna product bol raha hai. That's not my point. My point is a bigger one. The first internet was without a real exchange of value between the people who are viewing it, and hence ads became the value, which is a surrogate. The creator is a side story in the first age of internet. It's now that you have the next story potentially emerging.
That's interesting, Samir. It is quite a interesting look into what can be, and probably when I speak to you and then I just noting down whatever you're speaking, I find it extremely interesting because currently how I'm consuming a lot of my content via the newspaper. Number one, I pay for it as a subscription, not as a single paper. Number two, I pay for it to be delivered to me. Number three, after all of that, I am the product being sold to the advertisers. And number four, at the end of this nonsense, they put plugs inside it, which are paid for, which masquerade as news. And all of this nonsense, I so hope that people like you solve, so that I want to pay. I want to read that one thing. Here is that $1, here is that $5, here is that $10. Give me that knowledge and stop everything else. I think I wish you so much luck, Samir. Rajesh?
Thank you.
No, it's been a fantastic conversation. And just to add to what you said, Jamit, not only now you have to pay for the same story if you want to read it online.
Yeah, exactly.
Even if you subscribe to the print edition. But Samir, I think it's been a tremendous conversation. I think I always remember, the conversations we've had in my office. Hopefully we can have that soon again, where the energy that you really bring in and the passion that you bring in is so visible. We saw that today. All power to you. I think really what you're creating is, in a way, the next internet.
Thank you.
Yeah, and it's not just one internet, Rajesh. Remember, he said 2, and I just love the fact. I just love the fact that he brought about that intelligence came in through Facebook that allowed people to understand and figure and discover intelligence, and now probably there is a way to pay for it. Hopefully, at some point of time, Rajesh, do you think we'll ever charge for HippoBrain? I'm not so sure, but I'm sure people will have more such conversations that people can pay for, that allows probably the voice to be heard. The way I look at it is that if enough monetization of individual voices is possible, every edge of society has a voice, and that is true democracy, the way I look at it, of course. Thank you for listening to us, Sameer. Thank you for being an amazing HippoBrain. We've always had amazing insights, and thank you for listening to us or watching us. And yes, I know Sameer is not probably very happy, but we are on YouTube. Press subscribe.
No, I'm very happy about social. It's the foundation. We now must dig the deck there.
Okay, guys. See you.